What can we do to fight against the BC government decision to fight Kinder Morgan? Well, thanks, Kevin. I believe we need to use every tool in the toolkit to fight for not just the construction of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, but for the broader principle that's at play here. The question of whether or not Canada is a country governed by the rule of law and is an economic union. Now, what do I mean? Well, the economic union is a concept from our original 1867 Constitution that essentially says that provinces cannot erect barriers to trade in goods and services between one another. It's true that has not been consistently respected, but if Canada means anything as a united country, it must mean that when the federal government approves of major interprovincial infrastructure projects like a pipeline, like Kinder Morgan, that it must be built. And to do otherwise is to turn this country into a bunch of balkanized provincial economies as opposed to one national economy. And it also undermines the central governing premise of our society, which we call the rule of law, which goes all the way back to the Magna Carta in the 13th century, and as the basis of our law and our system of governance. And essentially, look, we've had the National Energy Board, which is an independent quasi-judicial tribunal that applies the highest environmental standards in the world, which after years of exhaustive study and consultation and scientific and environmental analysis, approved the twinning of the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline going from Edmonton to Burnaby. And that approval was then ratified by the federal cabinet. Every effort to block it has been rejected by the courts. And so whether we build this pipeline or not will ultimately determine whether we are a country of the rule of law. So I think, Kevin, that we should be using all the leverage we have. First, obviously, we should try to be diplomatic and persuasive. Our current government has hardly done that. The Premier Notley told us that her carbon tax was going to get us social license to get political approval from BC and other provinces for these pipelines. But clearly that hasn't worked out. A few months back, she went down to Vancouver, supposedly to advocate for Kinder Morgan after it had been received federal approval. And she didn't do a single speech or interview. She had a few quiet private meetings, including one with the then NDP opposition leader, John Horgan, who is now the Premier, following which meeting he said that Premier Notley didn't even try to persuade him. Those are his words, not mine. So let's try to be persuasive. Let us point out to our friends in British Columbia, who are in many cases our family relatives too, that their prosperity in part depends on our ability to develop in an environmentally responsible way and export or our energy products. The ability of BC benefits our federal transfers, healthcare and education, all of that benefits. So we need to make that case. Secondly, if the government of British Columbia refuses to cooperate following a real serious effort at persuasion, then we need to find points of leverage. Now, a lot of BC goods and services get shipped through Alberta. They sell us hydro energy. They sell us natural gas that comes out of the Peace country in northeastern BC. But let's not forget that the current Kinder Morgan pipeline, Trans Mountain Pipeline, has been taking oil, both refined and unrefined crude, from northern Alberta to the lower mainland for, I believe, nearly 65 years without any significant environmental incident, by the way. And a significant portion of the economy of the BC lower mainland operates because of the oil that is shipped there through Kinder Morgan. So I don't know, perhaps we should take a page out of Peter Lougheed's book when he restricted shipping permits for Alberta crude to go to Sarnia, Ontario in the early 1980s to protest anti-Alberta policies being established by the federal government. Perhaps, the mayor of Vancouver, Gregor Robertson, says that he'd like Vancouver to be a carbon-free economy by 2040. Maybe we could help to accelerate that, to get the attention of the BC government. Because one way or another, people in the Lower Mainland and British Columbia are keep that economy running in large part because of hydrocarbon-based energy, of which we are the major provider. So I think we actually do have a lot of leverage, and I would be prepared to use whatever leverage it takes to enforce the rule of law and the economic union.